Have you ever wanted to read the Summa Theologiae, but you're a little intimidated? I've been there, and if that's you, I have the book for you today. And today we will be talking about, I should say, welcome to the conversation of our generation, where we are solving the problems of today with the wisdom of the past. My name is Nick Jamel, and today I'll be talking about Peter Kreeft's kind of introduction to his introduction of the Summa called A Shorter Summa. He wrote the Summa of the Summa, which I also have. That's a bit thicker of a book, but still not as thick as the multi-volume set, the Summa Theologiae by Thomas Aquinas. But his work on A Shorter Summa is just fantastic because he really lays the groundwork for how to read the Summa. And if you're like me and you listen to a lot of podcasts where they quote Thomas, they cite Thomas, they talk about Thomism, etc., I found it really helpful to just read this. I think it's like 150, maybe 200-page book about Thomas Aquinas' views, and it has the Summa itself, like it has the actual text of certain questions and points in the Summa, but what Peter Kreeft does is add some notes and build it up a little bit. And so I want to bring it to you today. If you're really looking to get into reading Thomas Aquinas, I think this is a great introduction. But before I do that, I just want to remind you, before I make the full pitch for the book, I just want to remind you that you can support what I'm doing. If you're watching this on YouTube, click subscribe, make sure you get notifications as well. Just if you're watching, smash the like button, comment, all of those things to help out in the algorithm. Free, easy to do, and I appreciate all of that. And then as far as if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Google Play, etc., definitely subscribe and leave a good rating and review. That really helps, especially on Apple and Spotify. They really look at that for the algorithm, so definitely do that. And thank you for listening if you are listening, so I appreciate that. As you can tell, I still have a teeny bit of the cold left, a little bit of that happening, but much better than I was last week. And so I cannot complain at all. And so what I want to really dive into a little bit is, for those who don't know, I think it's good to start with who was Thomas Aquinas. And he was a Dominican friar, he's a Catholic saint, and a doctor of the church. He was basically, he's most well known as a philosopher who really helped bring Aristotle and the other Greeks into the Catholic tradition in a new way, right? There were a lot of people early on in the church, even Paul talks about some of the Greek philosophers, or at least when he's arguing with the men in Athens, you would assume he's arguing the Greek ideas. So he's familiar with them. And so they're always kind of there in the tradition, but Thomas Aquinas really brings it to the forefront and uses Aristotle's system and his terminology and all of that in order to make his points and to make his arguments. But he's also he also has numerous commentaries on different books of the Bible. He's done the Summa Contra Gentiles. I think I heard recently that he wrote kind of like, not psalms, hymns. Pardon me. He wrote hymns and other things like that, and prayers, I assume. So a lot of other stuff as well on the spiritual side, but he's really known for making the theological arguments because he's just so smart and so able to articulate himself. And not only that, he's also great at making his opponent's arguments. He's very, I think, well known and respected for not strawmanning, but really steelmanning his other person's position, taking the common argument that someone might throw at him and making it better than they would, and then tackling that argument. And so he's a fantastic thinker. And the Summa Theologiae is his biggest work. It's, depending on, I don't know exactly how many pages. Obviously, it depends a little bit on, how it's printed and everything. But the ones that I was looking at on Amazon when I ended up buying Peter Kreeft's summary instead were several volume, 3 volume sets. So lots and lots of content there. And I looked at that and said, yikes, I'm going to go ahead and read this shorter book and to just get a sense of it. And I think it was a good move for me just because I don't know if I would have plowed through the Summa. I still haven't bought it. I do need to buy it, but it's something that I think I don't know if I could just plow through it like I did this other book and really get it. And on top of that, what I found hard, like, I guess it makes sense to probably talk about the format of the Summa. So the Summa, basically what Thomas will do is he will kind of propose this topic, have a question basically, does God exist? Right? And then he'll put the objections and then his answers to the objections, and then he'll put his arguments in favor. So it's not necessarily answering the objections, but actually just building his actual case. So he does that. And I think it helped having Peter Kreeft there in the notes and in comments and everything to understand the format there. But then also Aquinas uses a lot of terms and a lot of, well, I guess I would say just terms in general in philosophy that you may not be familiar with if you haven't studied philosophy. Like, I really haven't formally studied it. I read a lot of it, but I do think that there is something that you get from getting an actual classical training where you learn the terms, you learn the background, the methodologies, etc. And I don't necessarily have that. I've started to pick it up a little bit by doing it or by reading it for fun, but I don't have that. So having Peter Kreeft, who's trained in that, to explain it was really, really helpful as well. And then his glossary of terms at the beginning. So when you're talking about potential, we're not talking about the potential that we talk about today, like a sports star who's a rookie, but he's doing really well. He's got potential, right? He could be big. I mean, that is, in a way, potential, but it means more than that, right? To Aquinas. His argument from motion, I always thought it was the weakest. And then when I read what he means by motion, I'm like, oh, that might be one of I think the contingency is still the strongest, but I was like, that's a close number 2 right there for me. And so that I think is really helpful because the Summa is very dense, and I think if you just are looking at that by itself for a couple thousand pages, it's going to be a lot, especially if you're like me and you're just reading for fun. It just doesn't look like it's going to be fun. I'm sure it is, and I'm sure I would actually enjoy it, but it didn't feel like that at the time. And honestly, I don't know if I would be saying I need to go out and buy it and read it if I hadn't had a little bit of background in this and listen to some more Pints with Aquinas and some other people who talk about his ideas more, because I do want to be able to enter into that conversation a little bit better. But the Summa is just a fantastic work. And the funny thing is, as I'm talking about it being kind of intimidating, he really meant it to be a introductory level course to Catholicism, basically. Like, it was like for seminarians who were coming in to basically be their introduction to seminary, if I'm not mistaken. People feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. So basically, an introductory college level course is how we should look at it almost, which is incredible. That said, I think people were much better catechized starting off than they are now. I surely was. And I think that that's another thing. If you're like me and you kind of missed a good catechesis as a kid and you're trying to build it in as an adult, I just think that Thomas Aquinas is a wonderful way to do that. If you're like me and you're a heady person, I like the ideas. I like the understanding God by understanding truth. I think that points to him in a big way, and I enjoy that. So if you like that, I think it's a great introduction here. Peter Kreeft's A Shorter Summa. There's links here in the show notes if you want to grab it. I definitely recommend you do, because I think it opens up Thomas Aquinas in a very accessible way. And a way as well for high school kids. So if you're an adult and you have kids, I think it's great for them as well. It's very accessible from that fact. It's more accessible than any Shakespeare you're reading. So I'll put it that way. So if they can read Shakespeare in their lit class, then I think they could do this as well. So definitely check that out. Check out the links in the show notes. And if you're enjoying this, definitely subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, everywhere that podcasts are found, and leave a rating and review. That really helps. But also, if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can go to conversationofourgeneration.com/subscribe, or you can buy my book on Amazon, Property Rights in the Digital Age. You can find that on Amazon. You can find that on my website and buy it there. I have copies in a box right over here on my desk, so I have those to send out. But if you want to, if you buy it through the website, I get a bit of a bigger chunk versus if you go to Amazon. That's all. But it's not that much bigger. So if you want to buy it on Amazon, because it's easy, do it. If you're going to buy it, I appreciate all the support that I get. And you can get it on Kindle as well. So definitely check that out. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Like I said, still a bit of a cold lingering. So thank you, though, for listening to this episode of The Conversation of Our Generation. Let's get the dialogue going. I'll talk to you next time.